All right. Welcome everyone to this edition of our resume workshop. My name's Cliff Guerin. Dorothy and Christy, who are on the slide, are not going to be here, but that's okay. I was scheduled to present, so I'm glad you're here to be with us today. So if you need to step away, if you need or being called, if you're working, you're being called away, that's fine. Take care of whatever you need. So that you if you need to get a drink of water, you need a bio break, anything like that. Because as I said, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to come back and catch up with anything you missed. If you need to contact us for any reason after the presentation, you certainly can shoot us a quick message to our website, to our email at careers@wgu.edu. And one of our team will get back with you. If it's something specific you want to ask me as the presenter, you could just say, hey, Cliff, or attention, Cliff, or anything like that. And then it will get to me. We will be doing a Q&A after the presentation. People will have questions, and that's perfectly fine. We might have a bit of a crowd today, so that's even greater, but I'll get to your questions as they pop in, or if you want to save them toward the end, then I can address those without interrupting the presentation. All right, for our agenda today, we're going to go over the applicant tracking systems, how they're used, what you need to know about them so that you can be best positioned to get your resume pushed through that beginning application process, and for that to not get in the way or stop your application. We'll do a walkthrough, obviously, through a resume. We'll look at a sample resume. I am a certified resume writer. I've been doing this for pretty good, nearly 18 years. And so things have changed. Things are changing, and that's perfectly fine as long as we all understand what those changes are, how to implement them into our resumes, and as much as we can, know how those changes are being used by recruiters, by employers, by those applicant tracking systems. So we'll look at a resume and walk through that. We'll look at some standard do's and don'ts of resumes, things to avoid, things to make sure that you are aware of to put on your resume. And we'll also look at a job description. Job descriptions are really your best friend when it comes to writing your resume, because the job description is exactly what the employer is going to be using when they're evaluating your qualifications. So you want to make sure you don't just do one general resume and apply to many different jobs, because one size does not fit all. And the job description is one of the strong keys for you to use to make sure your resume does get to those applicant tracking systems and they are tailored to the different jobs. Now, we'll talk about that when throughout the presentation as well. And then, of course, in today's new world of artificial intelligence, we'll talk a little bit about how to use some of those AI tools that are out there when building and writing your resume. So let's jump right into the applicant tracking systems. So with the applicant tracking systems, it's important to know that most companies today are going to be using these tools when you're applying to jobs. The reason they're being used is because if there is one or two jobs, there are one or two jobs that are opened and hundreds of people are applying to that job, no team of people can probably get through those hundreds of applications in a timely way. So many years ago, decades ago, these applicant tracking systems were created to help parse through the applications, building a kind of your own profile in the company's database, and then, of course, scanning those resumes for the keywords and qualifications. So it's a much quicker and efficient process to either say you're in the yes pile or the no pile. And then once that process is concluded, it'll go on to a human person or persons, and hopefully they will have a better way of scrutinizing through those details. So there are two critical things you want to keep in mind with the applicant tracking systems. Put it to you very straight and upfront, don't use a template. Don't go out there to Microsoft Word or to any other resume website and pull out a really cool looking, snazzy, artsy, detailed template, because those templates, for the most part, are not created by resume writers. They're not created by employers. They're typically created by desktop publishers, folks who say, hey, a picture will look great. Let's put this dark blue bar to the left. Let's line up your contact information with these cool looking icons of a telephone and an email. And, it might look cool, but those can sometimes confuse those applicant tracking systems or those AI tools if they can't read those pictures, or if they can't read some of the preset formatting. So I typically say, keep it simple. We've developed some resumes samples that are geared and aligned to our degree programs. They're on our website for resumes under Get the Job. We'll show you how to find that. Stick to that. You're not going to get an interview because you have sprinkles on your resume. You're going to get the resume if it looks professional, it's clean, it's easy to read, and it fits the qualifications from those job descriptions. So the keyword match is going to be important. We'll talk about that a little bit as well, because that match rate is what's going to be important for you to get through those AI scans and those ATS. And again, when it gets to a recruiter, they're going to read this and say, did you take the time to tailor your resume to this specific job? And are you using your language, but our keywords to say, I am qualified for this position and here's the proof. It's not what I can do, it's how I can do it as well. And that is deciphered through how you write your resume to that particular job. If it's too low, if time is an issue and you're just shooting those resumes out to the different jobs and it's a low match rate, then you're going to get that message to say, thank you for applying, but we have gone in a different direction, or we have chosen someone who is more qualified, whatever the message is going to be, if you get a message, right? And I know that some students that I've worked with, they don't even get a message that they have been passed by. They just, get fallen in the black hole. And when students come to us to say, I've applied to dozens or hundreds of jobs and I'm getting nothing. I'm getting no response, or I'm getting rejections. First thing I do is, let's look at your resume. We have a resume review process. Let's go through that. And oftentimes there are some areas that could be the issue, and then we address that. So again, and repeating some things about those applicant tracking systems, also avoid using a PDF unless on the instructions of how to apply to a particular job, they say you can send us a Word document or a PDF. Don't send a Google Doc. And we get students who will, for whatever reason, when they send a resume in for a resume review, it comes in as a link and we can't open it without permission. It says you need permission to open this document. I would just stick to a Word document that you upload from your desktop. It's pretty much the foolproof way of getting that document to open up on the other side. You want to be careful of some of these stylized features that I talked a little bit about before. The things you want to avoid would be columns, colors, tables, text boxes, things of that sort. Those are things you want, because again, those applicant tracking systems may not get through. That could cause a little bit of a problem for that. Now, I know that somebody raised their hand. I'm not, is that Tracy maybe? Yes. So Tracy, if you want to put a question or a comment in the chat, you can do that. We're going to try to run through the slides, but I'll try to answer those questions during the presentation, or if you want to hold on to that till after the presentation, I'll do my best to get to it. So again, areas that we have seen and that we have been told by recruiters that don't always work with certain application processes are using columns, colors, tables, text boxes, footers and headers. Those applicant tracking systems can't read through those. And even though with AI, they may be a little bit more intuitive, but we don't know. We can't tell you exactly which ones work and which ones don't. So the safest thing again is just keep it simple, abide by some of the more common rules or guidelines for resume building, because your point is, again, you want to make a good first impression, but that impression is mostly going to be through, can I read your resume clearly enough, get the information I need, and are you qualified for the position? I thought this was interesting, and this does come out to be pretty true, that when a recruiter, when he gets to a recruiter and the recruiter is reading your resume, they're going to only probably skim it for a few seconds to pick up, are you qualified? Do you have the right education? What's your experience? Are there transferable skills? So for the most part, they're looking at your contact information. They're looking at prior job titles, companies you work for, how you're writing those accomplishment statements, those bullet points. Are there any gaps in your employment? Long gaps, like 2 or 3 years, for things like that. And what's your education or your, do you have certifications? Do you have continued training in a particular area that can make you good for that? Now, one comment from Jeff, does the formatting with word processor get screwed in comparison to PDF, or are we only going for computer scannable content here? For the most part, it's going to be computer scannable content, just because that's going to be what's most important when you're applying to those positions. Unless they ask for a PDF, and that's perfectly fine. But a PDF is a protected document format, which is almost just like a big picture. So, if it comes through, and some companies are going to be, obviously, they're going to be, savvy enough to be able to open a PDF. But if it doesn't get to them because it gets caught in that transmission or that applicant tracking system, then it just doesn't work. So that's kind of my thought on that, and I hope that helps. Now here's a sample resume. I'm going to give you my interpretation of this, my 2 cents on this, and you can take it for what you want. Here is a comment from Tracy regarding using Word docs versus PDF. I've had Word documents have different formatting, bad formatting, bullet points don't align. It's true. That's true that can happen on a different workstation, even though they were both Word documents. This is true as well. For example, my employer used Word 2013, but my version was the newer Office 365. Is that something to be concerned about? I think it can certainly be something to be aware of. And I've had that happen where students send resumes in, I do the review. When I attach it back and to send it back, I get a message box that says that it was an older version. Do you want to update it to a newer version? And I say yes. Nobody's come back to say, hey, I can't open this, or hey, it's all jumbled. There's not a lot we can do from our part with that, except again, just trying to make sure that it gets through. If you have any doubt, and if there's a way to contact that HR department, for example, and just let them know that you're calling in to make sure that your document came through and it's able to be opened and read. That's totally legitimate to do that if you have the opportunity, just to make sure. But again, what's a bigger concern is if you do a PDF and it doesn't get through, you may not be notified that they never received it. So it's a little bit of a gray area, and it can be a little bit of a controversy on what's going to be the best way. So far, with most employers I've talked to, and I'm in Dallas, Texas, by the way, and I used to work for the University of Texas in Arlington, between Dallas and Fort Worth. So we had a lot of employers, a lot of recruiters come, and some would even come and do resume labs or resume workshops. All of them, to my memory, have said use a Word document. So that's also what I'm going on as well. I know that's a long explanation or response, but I hope that helps. Yeah. So good. All right. So let's go back to the sample that's here. Obviously, at the top of your resume, you want to have your name, first name, last name. I recommend not using all caps. I recommend using what we call mixed case. So that's going to be just your first and last name capitalized, just because it, if you have a long name, it could just look like a bunch of letters and it might be hard to read. So I would just, again, keep it simple. Avoid using nicknames. So if your name is Robert, don't put in parentheses Bob. Keep it your professional given name, and then during the interview, if you go by a different name, you can introduce yourself by that name at the interview. At the end of your name, if you're in the master's program or you have a master's already, you could put your credentials there, like MBA or MSML, but you don't need to put your bachelor's, or definitely not an associate's. Those initials at the end of your name are typically reserved for only master's programs, RNs. If you're in the accounting program and you have a specific accounting certification, not all certifications, but specific ones, PhDs, things of that sort. If there's a doubt, you could ask us. Or just leave it off. It's not going to make a huge difference as far as your qualifications. So when they get down to your education section, they'll see that you may have specific of those higher degree programs. So next line on the sample resume, you want to have obviously your contact information. So I usually say go in order of priority. How do you want them to contact you first? So phone number, email, LinkedIn. If you're in the IT College of Technology and you have a GitHub or any other portfolio, you can put that there. That's perfectly legitimate to have that there as well. Next would be your professional summary or portfolio or profile. It says optional at the end of this. I think it's important to have it there because this is your 30-second commercial. This is your introduction of setting the stage for the reader to say, and to give you a chance to use those keywords from the job description, talk about your qualifications for this particular specific job that you're applying to. It sets the stage for the reader, and it can be a really good, like I said, kind of your 30-second commercial for that. The one thing you want to avoid, and you'll see this later on, is you want to avoid first-person pronouns. I, me, my. This is your document. Your name's at the top. It's a writing style for resume specifically, so those first-person pronouns are not necessary. And it's just part of the writing style. There are different writing styles: writing a book, writing a newspaper article. You're writing a term paper of some kind. There's a particular writing style that course may require. Resumes have their own writing style as well, and that's one of those. So yes, Nikki, if you came in a little later, we are recording this, and everybody will get a copy of the recording within 48 hours of the presentation. Thank you for asking, just reminding folks about that. So a couple things that you can add that if we showed every type of different resume, we'd probably be here all afternoon. But one that can be specific, if you're in the School of Technology, you're getting your degree in software development, cybersecurity, data analytics, anything like that, you can put a technology competencies section that can show operating systems, programming languages, databases, security, cybersecurity protocols, things of that sort. That can really be a very good kind of eye catcher for employers. Anybody can do that. If you're in the College of Business, if you're in healthcare and you want to show your clinical acumen, you can create a section that displays those specific skills that you have. It could be very informative for an employer to see those right up front. Then, of course, you can go right into your professional experience that's there. The red lettering here is, just some kind of things to keep in mind, what you want to use. But mostly, you'll have your job title, you'll have your employer name, city and state. The dates you can put on the same line as your job title all the way over to the far right of the page. The reason for that is to help the recruiter kind of go down the right edge of the page to look at the dates. Are there any gaps? Is everything okay? It's just a stylistic strategy to help the reader quickly find the information that they're looking for. Another good point by Jeff, and this goes perfect with the bullet points that are under your company name. If you use something like the STAR technique or the STAR method to show, what was your role? What was your action that you took for something? What was the result? And if you can even quantify something, and I get this a lot more for folks that are in the School of Business, accounting, that sort of thing, finance, even those who work with sales, if you can show a percentage or an increase, then that could be very helpful for that as well. Thanks, Jeff, for putting it in there. So that STAR method is something good to show, again, some really good accomplishment statements. And Elton, yeah, if you bold out the key words that match the job description, that brings your eye to them as well. But use it sparingly. Make sure you're not bolding a lot that's through the resume. Otherwise, it gets distracting. But that is another good a good point that folks have used. Okay, Janice, what have you used, or what have you been somewhere long term with substantial growth? That would, and I've seen folks do that, and they even have different roles at the same company. So they would put the company name maybe first. They put the company name first, then the full range of dates, maybe just the year to year, for example. And then under that, they would put their different roles, and then the dates of those roles. That formatting kind of is somewhat self-explanatory, that today's recruiters and employers can catch on pretty quickly. What you want to be careful of is you don't want to use a lot of detail for the different individual jobs. And this could slide into a little bit more of personalizing your resume, where you might want to, be able to attach that to a message to an advisor from us if it gets into too much detail for that. But that's one way to do that, and then show that growth. And I've had, even with the growth aspect, I've had students actually write in to say their first bullet point was, advanced from associate to department manager. And then under that, they would describe their leadership roles or leadership qualifications. So it's letting that reader know right off the bat, here's kind of my progressive growth within this company. So you can see here, kind of aligning to what Jeff had pulled out as well. When you look at the bullet points, especially that last one on our sample, you can see the action verb task result, very close to the situation task result of the STAR method. So here again, as I mentioned, some really strong accomplishment statements and things that you might want to consider to include. Starting with that action verb, describing the task or activity. Don't just give responsibilities. That's a little too passive. You know, responsibilities include. No, don't tell me what you did. Tell me how did you do it. Numbers, if you can include that. Tools you used, especially on the technology side. Now, again, your bullet points need to be no more than 2 lines. 3 if you really push it. I'm a stickler for trying to keep it to 2 lines. So some of these you may not want to include just yet, but just get the basic strongest relevant, accomplishments down. Otherwise you're writing, too much of a paragraph for each one. But we'd rather give you all of these to show you what you can include without, watering it down. Here's the other part of the resume. So if you have additional experience, this is optional. I typically just say keep your work experience in one smooth flowing section and not break it up into other, even if it's not relevant, but it's within 10 to 12 years of your work history. Employers will understand that and they will say, I know this is not irrelevant necessarily, but I want to see your work history in its full totality and not break it up or not leave it out, because then my brain as a recruiter is going to look at your work history and say, okay, even though it's not a job that we're going to consider as qualified, but we are looking at your dates, and the dates do matter. Then your education section can go toward the end. Now I'm going to throw another little wrench in here. If you're a job changer and you're applying to an industry totally new that you have no experience in whatsoever, then you can move your education to the top after your summary. Let me say that again. If you're applying to a job that is as a career changer is totally a new industry and experience for you, you can move your education, put it at the top of your resume after the summary. The purpose of that will now begin to show that you're leveraging your new education in this field, and you want them to see I am making advances in my academic experience by going to WGU, getting my MBA or getting my degree. Here are some relevant courses. Here's my capstone project if you have done a capstone project, or here are some projects that are relevant that show my good work toward why I'm applying to this particular job. Okay, another question about volunteer experience. That's good too, but not in an industry experience. So yeah, if you can show volunteer experience that is relevant, but it's not a work or paid for, that's still experience. Projects are in that same camp. If you've worked on a project because you're trying to beef up and sharpen your skills, that's still experience. And employers do factor that into your overall qualifications. So good points, everyone. Now, at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see in red, you don't have to stay with a one-page resume, especially if you have, as Janice says, you have substantial growth and it's either transferable skills or direct relevant skills. They may not all fit on one page. Employers don't get out of sorts if you have a 2-page resume, only if it's like just really too detailed. If it's too cluttered looking, then it could be cleaned up and maybe a 1-pager would look a little better. So another question, do recruiters take into consideration the longevity at an organization when gaps are present in a resume as one finds a new job or niche? Um, I think they do, and it depends on the gaps. We're still kind of riding the wave from the pandemic that if you have a year, up to a year of a gap, that's not going to be as much of a big deal as maybe it used to be. Um, but if you have 2 or 3 years and it's a gap in that way, what you mostly want to do, and again, I hear this from recruiters, and what they'd like to see is what were you doing during that time? Were you in school? Then put that in. Were you traveling? Were you taking care of family for some reason? Then a very brief explanation. Um, you know, primary caregiver for elderly parents, now returning to full-time work, something like that so that they know what was happening during that time. What is the current rule of thumb on job history length? Okay. And that's that next section I was going right into, Janice. So that red part is you want to keep there's no concrete number, but what most folks have sort of landed on is that 10 to 15 years could be fine. Now, I know that there are some jobs in healthcare, in teaching, nurses, things of that sort. You may be in your field for more than 20 years with that. You can't get around that, so if you need to write that in, that's perfectly fine, and I think, again, employers will understand that. But if you have had different jobs, don't keep going back to 17, 18, 20 years with that. So most employers, when they're looking at like your history, they'll probably stop reading at about that 10 to 15 year mark and won't read the rest. That's not always the case. It's not always the case, but sometimes that happens. I hope that helps a little bit. And when I do reviews, if I see folks who go back into, 2010, 2007, 2006, I'll make a comment. I'll put a comment there. Even if it's relevant, what you can do with those skills is like, but that was really relevant. That was really strong. And that's what I'm going back into. Then there are ways to get around that kind of. It could be just listing those in that additional work experience, or using the keywords in your summary at the top to make sure that that is found when your resume is read. So there are some areas where we can be flexible and kind of bend and be limble with that. It's just a way, how do we do it in the best way that makes sense and doesn't add any confusion to the resume? So Allison says that she is freshly out of college and having only one job, non-retail job. Should I go back to high school with the 10-year rule or focus on post-high school? Post-high school. Don't include high school at all with that, not even in your education section, because it's not going to be part of that resume nature of that resume. Employers will not take that into consideration, even if you did something that would be relevant. You might save it for the interview and to say, hey, I'm just out of high school. I just finished college, right out of high school. And I did this. I did these things. I worked on campus. I did volunteer work. It's not on my resume, but I think it's important to talk about to show how I can bring that experience to this position if I were chosen. Put it in a narrative, put it in that kind of conversation. It's best if it's done during the interview. Now, some quick do's and don'ts. Going to the left side of the page under our green check mark. These are going to be a little bit repetitive. We've covered some of this ground, and that's perfectly fine. It doesn't hurt to have it reminded to us again. Obviously, you want your resume to have your first name, last name. I wouldn't use a title. I wouldn't have my name, Cliff Guerin, and then under my name, professional career advisor. That's not necessary. That's going to be seen in my job titles when they read that there. Um, there's no hard and core rule why not to do that. But if you're fighting for space on your resume and trying to streamline it and not have it too cluttered, that's something that is really very optional. You don't have to use. I would recommend you use a classic font, for a resume. A sans serif font, that's going to be like Calibri or Arial. Times New Roman is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't get fancy. Don't go through your font, list and say, oh, that looks kind of cool, and put that in there. I don't see that very often. Sometimes I do, but it's almost like one of the comments made before, that if there is something with different versions of Word or in the transmission of going from me to you, and your system is not using the same font family, then it's going to replace it with something else. Sometimes they're hieroglyphics. I mean, sometimes they're just symbols because it doesn't have anything, and it's like, well, I don't know what this is. I'm just going to put this junk in there. I don't know. So to avoid that from happening, keep it simple. Sans serif font, something like that would be fine. We talked about the page limit. For that, I hope that was clear. Maintaining consistency in formatting. And what I mean by that is, when you have your resume, you might want to put it away for a moment. Just take a break, come back, look at it later. Are your bullet points lined up straight, correctly under each other? Are there no weird indentions or spaces that's there? I see this pretty clear because I've been doing this for a number of years, but are your bullet points, are your font sizes all the same? And I've had folks that have had different font sizes because they've cut and pasted maybe from a previous resume and say, why should I write this all out again? I'll just cut and paste it. But it's a different font or it's a different size. And so you want to be able to proofread your resume. You should do it anyway, right? But proofread your resume with the mindset of, does everything look the same? And that might help as well. So Jeff says, again, that AI is great for scanning a resume against keywords in the job description. Skills, that's great, is one of that he's used in introduction. That's good. We're going to look at some others as well in just a moment. But if you have used other AI scanning or resume platforms and you want to share that, that's great. That's another great reason why we have these workshops, is to get you all to work together and network. Networking is really good. We have a networking presentation that we do, and especially with LinkedIn, and folks will share their LinkedIn URLs during that presentation. And wow, that's a great opportunity to get some good folks here. All right. So again, we talked about being intentional, really customizing your resume to that specific job. This, again, it's another gray area because folks will say, but what if I'm going to a job fair or I'm going to a career expo or networking event? I can't have a resume for every different job that might be there. Then this is what I say about that. Then write your resume not to the job, but to the industry. That's a little different. That's going to probably put a little bit more weight on your education section. It'll put a little bit more weight on your summary profile at the top, where you're not targeting one particular company, but you're writing it toward the industry. If it's software development, what's your background with software development, the tools you've used, projects you've worked on, things of that sort. It's the best next step to do if you're posting your resume to LinkedIn or Handshake. Some you can put a number of resumes on. If you're applying to federal jobs, I think you can put up to a number of resumes, but maybe only one would be visible to the recruiter or to that job announcement. That sort of thing. So writing it to the industry in those circumstances might help you kind of put your arms around that question of what do I do if it's not to a particular company? But for the most part, in most all circumstances, to the best of your ability that you can do it, write it to the job description. I'll always go back to that. All right, let's shift over to our right side of things to avoid or be aware of. Don't copy the entire job description or keywords and put them in your resume. Recruiters are savvy enough, they'll know what's being done with that. Don't take, and I've had only two in my career, only two circumstances of this, where people would take all the keywords, they just put them in a list on the resume, and then they'll highlight, they'll color the font color to white so it disappears. But if that's found out, you're booted out. You're not going to get even a phone call, probably, because they would consider that cheating. I had this happen at UTA when I was working at the University of Texas, and there was a spelling that that word caught that they thought was misspelled. So there was that red squiggly line that was just floating out there in space, and I'm like, that looks suspicious. So I just highlighted the entire document, colored everything in black, and there was that list, a long list of all those keywords. So when the student came back to get their resume, we had a little talk. So it was a teachable moment where I was able to, I didn't, beat them over the head with the resume. I just let them know that you want to avoid doing this. This is how it can work against you. And so we were able to talk about that and come up with another way of showing those. But that's what that bullet point means. Don't copy the keywords in white text. List of references used to be a thing back in the day, references upon request. I've been seeing it a couple times actually recently. That's dropped off resumes. When employers want references, they'll call or they'll ask for that during that vetting point to say, hey, you're close to being maybe one that we're calling in for an interview. So they'll say, can you send us a list of references? But it's no longer part of today's resumes. Again, as a reminder, you want to avoid tables, text boxes, borders, footers, headers. Avoid using personal pronouns. And if you're concerned about space, and this becomes a question too, you can use the smallest text to use. You can use the size of 10 points in your bullet points, in your summary, things of that sort. Your name, I would say no larger than 16. You're going to see some to say, well, maybe 20, but I think 16 is a good round number to use. So font size does come up in some questions. You don't have to use all 12-point size for the entire resume. I'd kind of mix it up a little bit. So there's some visual interest that's there and it all doesn't look the same. That can always be argued and we can always talk about ways where that might help. I don't know. Letters of recommendation replacing references? Not really. Not in a sense to where they're doing a character check or they're saying, we want 3 to 5 professional references, because they're going to call those people and they'll talk to them. That happened to me here at WGU. I had, our manager call 3 of my references for that. So letters of recommendation don't necessarily, I would probably bring those to the interview unless they are okay including that as part of your application package, but mostly they wait for that or they'll ask for that later. But they do, if they want references, they want references. All right. Here is a sample of a job description. And the reason I pulled this up is usually the top of the job description will actually talk about the company, right? They'll talk about who they are and why they're good and why you should apply for a position with them. Then they'll go into the responsibilities and say, this is what you would be doing if you were hired for this position. And then they'll say, for you to be qualified, you've got to have at least these minimum skills and requirements so you can do the job that we outlined at the top. Now, what we did is that we highlighted some in red, as you can see, to show that this is how you can read a resume to use for your, read a description to use for your resume when they're talking about and repeating words: customer service, communications, collaboration, agile, customer life cycle, community development, things that are high level kind of things that's listed on here. That's when you want to make sure that is on your resume, or you can show transferable skills. Strong client interaction, relevant to customer service solutions, something like that. Trying to show those transferable skills and connecting the dots for the employer. That was the purpose of looking at the job description, not just to show, am I close to being qualified, but really read the entire document, because there could be some important information that is displayed there that you might miss if you just only look at the skills and responsibilities. So a good process to consider when you're looking at your resume and working on it to revamp it, perhaps. You want to keep it, again, we talked about how this could be in a gray area. Pull 3 or 4 different job descriptions. Don't just look at one, look at how different companies are talking about the same role. That might help you to really be able to have a fuller picture of your qualifications. You're doing kind of an analysis to find those requirements and those skills that are common across different jobs. Job titles will change, but the roles and the skill sets may always be very similar, to see if you're qualified for this new pivot, if you're making it for the first time. Here is using some basics for developing your resume for the type of role. Mirror that language. Again, you want to make it your own language, but you want to be able to use the keywords. For example, if they say that you need to be cognizant of using Microsoft Excel, then don't just put spreadsheets. You need to use Microsoft Excel exactly how they put it in there. Making decisions, is going to help you to really be analytical, to decide what goes in there, what doesn't. What should I keep off? You don't have to put every single thing you did at a particular job. Think about what's most relevant. 3 strong bullet points are better than 6 bullet points. And again, making the decision on where to prioritize the location of your skills and experiences. Some people will do a separate skills section, and to say, hey, I did this throughout several different types of jobs, but I'm going to synthesize them into one section. I'm still going to put my work history, but I'm going to synthesize the different skills, so it's a nice, tight package that employers can look at that might make a little bit more sense and help them see, my qualifications. So like what Jeff had put in here as a sample of one of the AI scans he uses. Here are some others you can use. TagCrowd, in my opinion, it's fine. It's kind of old school, so to speak. You upload your resume to TagCrowd, and it does a word cloud that makes the most relevant words bigger. It might be really good for the job description. Like I showed you that one where I did it in red. A TagCloud will show the most repeated words bigger than the others. So it could be kind of cool to look at. Some AI scanners. The first bullet is pretty new to Big Interview. If you've worked with Big Interview from our office, that's one of our interview platforms. They just posted or updated their platform to include a resume AI scanner. It'll grade your resume. It'll give you tips on how to make it better. like some of these others. Hey, look, second bullet point is yours, Jeff. Jobalytics, that's really good to use. ResScore, JobScan, those are all really good tools to use for this purpose. Again, you're going to get a copy of this presentation, so if you need to go back and write these out later, you're going to get a copy to be able to go back and look at some of these references. Now, if you want a resume review after you get yours set up, this is how you do it. Don't just send it in to us and say, hey, look at my resume. We have a process we want you to go through to add to your own knowledge and ability to work with your own resume as you're applying to jobs. This is how you find that information. Go to our homepage, click on Career Tools, where the green arrow is. This page will come up. Under Resource Library, click under Get the Job. It'll take you to this next page. You can click on Resumes, or you can just scroll down and you'll see the resumes and the steps to follow for that. I know a couple of clicks here and there, but that's how you'll get to our page. Now, a few words about AI, artificial intelligence. If you're a little late to the game, AI is actually that simulation. It's based on machine learning. It learns as it gets to know you a little bit better. It's not really scary. I know a lot of people are like, it's going to take over the world. No, probably not. But there's some things you need to know about this. It is a simulation of human intelligence. It's not real human intelligence. So there are some warnings, some things to keep in mind. It will enable them to, like I said, learn, reason, make decisions, help solve problems. As it learns, it gets better for you, but it's not perfect, and it's not always going to give you the right answer. So you need to keep that in mind with that. It will revolutionize the job search process. I'm working with one of my colleagues on 2 different workshops on AI for the job search. So we do publish that on our events page. We try to push that out to students like CareerQuest. Have you been getting emails on CareerQuest? We try to add when those workshops will be published for you on that. And AI is now powering tools that will help recruiters, like the applicant tracking systems and hiring managers. So the more that you know how it works and you can use it for yourself, employers are also using AI. So one warning is, don't use AI to just write your resume and say it's done. Now I'm going to apply to jobs. You want to go back and you need to proofread it, make it your own. It's only a tool to get started, not to finish, not to be the end all of your purpose for that. So some other considerations. One term that I use is high tech, high touch. That means use AI, but then that human touch, that's you. Go back, make sure that it sounds like you. It doesn't sound like a robot. It's not always accurate. So you want to make sure that if you're uploading your job description, that it's using the right language and right keywords. If it's giving you suggestions on your summary, for example, AI is biased or can be biased. What we mean by that, and what the experts mean by that, is that when it's being programmed by humans, it may leave out certain information. It could be population. It could be areas of gender, areas of race, things that identify us as people and as humans could be skewed. And so AI doesn't know that. They're not going to come back to say, hey, wait a minute, you forgot this. Or, hey, don't put this in here. So it could be biased in that way. Again, be mindful of the information you share in AI. Sometimes folks will say, don't do a resume, but leave off your contact information, because it will create a database. So if you're concerned about privacy, just use your content information and leave the rest of it off. All right. So Generative AI, you'll see that it's conversational. It's what we call it's natural language processing, NLP, natural language processing. So although it can be kind of freakish, you can write out the question just like you have it, just like y'all have done here. How should someone address previous career experience that is not directly related to a new career field? Is it better to say less about the previous jobs and focus on relevant project instead? If you put that in AI, it's going to give you an answer. And I'm sorry, Kay, I just saw that. But yeah, I would use projects for that, maybe at the top of your resume so that you can show, and maybe your education at the top so you can start uploading or front loading what is most relevant that you're learning now for that. So sorry, I missed that question that's there. All right. Review it carefully. That's always the best case in most cases. Using AI to help prompt your thinking about what to highlight on your resume. So there are certain prompts, and that's what I was just talking about as well. This is something new. I just found this out yesterday. If you're taking notes, take note of this. That Perplexity.ai is a platform like the others. You have free access to Perplexity Pro. What? Yes, you have free access to the Pro version of Perplexity. What you want to do is when you go there and you're filling out your building an account, you want to be able to use your WGU credentials. So your WGU email, sign in credentials, things like that. I just found this out yesterday. We've had some of our staff go in and create accounts as well for that. So yay. All right, Perplexity.ai. So the prompts, here's an example of that. Here's one thing, and this is written out word for word. Use my resume below. You can say please, it doesn't matter if you say please or not. Identify my top transferable skills for the job description below. So if you have them both, you both load it up in Perplexity or one of the other, then AI will look at that and it will give you what it's asking for. But you don't have to just, keep what it gives you. You don't have to just, rely on what it gives you. If it's not what you wanted, let it know. Tell them, wait, please provide more concise version of my transferable skills. And it will do that. It's pretty cool. Oh, the summary of qualifications is too long. Can you shorten it? It'll do that. Pretty cool. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I know we're at time. And if you have to go, thank you for joining us. I'm going to keep going because you will get a copy of this. But this is a cheat sheet for ChatGPT. To upgrade your resume, you can read through this when you get the email with the video link. Look at some of the tools. More are included on this. Some will be repeated, what we just talked about, but I think you'll find it very helpful. And here's our contact information. How will you find our website? If you want to bookmark that there. All of our videos of our different sessions will be on our YouTube channel. You can go there. If you can't find a time to go to one of the others, you can go to our YouTube channel to find a copy that's there as well. Our email, our phone number. Now, our phone number will go to our voicemail. So when you go through this, you will go to our voicemail, leave a message, and then someone will call you back. Thank you, all of you who have said thank you. I appreciate that. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. We do have drop-in hours, and that you can be registered on Handshake. We're going to do drop-in hours for resumes as well. It's not a presentation. It's just a chance to come in and throw your questions at us and help you out. So thank you again for joining us. I hope you got something out of this. Those who are still with me, everybody will get a copy of the recording. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.